Welcome to episode 8 of Community First, the podcast dedicated to discussing social and legal issues with the community. I am Michelle Suman, your host for today's episode. Today, we discuss an alluring topic. I do, but how do I? In this episode, we seek to educate you, our listeners, on how to validly contract a marriage and avoid the celebration of a thing that looks like marriage but is not. Our guest for this episode is Mrs. Frederica Ashirin Obeng, a senior lecturer at the Ghana School of Law. Mrs. Ashirin Obeng is a lawyer of 53 years standing at the Ghana Bar and has in-depth knowledge on today's topic, having taught the family law course for almost 15 years. She's the product of the best all-girls senior high school in Ghana, Wesley Girls High School, you guessed right, and Ghana National College, Cape Coast. Frederica has a varied international experience in her legal practice, having worked in Ghana and South Africa in various capacities. You should see her profile, it's so impressive. She brings a particularly refreshing level of excitement and insight to family law, and I can personally attest to that because she taught me in school at the Ghana School of Law. Frederica has authored a number of books, including the very popular At a Glance, Contemporary Principles of Family Law in Ghana, which is a must-have. She's therefore clearly the best woman for the job. At the end of this session, you will be able to tell if your marriage is indeed valid. And for those of you planning to get married, you will also know what to do. Welcome, Mrs. Frederica Ashirin Obeng. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm also happy to be here.
So we'll get right into it. Can you tell us the types of marriage recognized in Ghana?
Yeah. There are 3 types of marriage in Ghana. We have the customary marriage, the Mohammedan marriage, and the Ordinance Marriage.
Okay. So which category would the Christian, in quotes, Christian marriages fall under?
Well, these marriages will fall under the Ordinance Marriage.
Okay.
Ordinance
Marriage.
Okay.
So there's this unpopular opinion that I have, that you do not need to do both the customary marriage and the ordinance marriage. Some people like to do both following closely. So on Saturday, we'll do the traditional, and the next Saturday, we'll then go to church and get it blessed, or we'll do the ordinance marriage. What do you say to that? Yeah,
everything is depends on the parties. It's their choice, you know. But the law does not need or require a customary law marriage to make an ordinance marriage valid.
Wow.
Yes, like we say in law, we say that customary law marriage is not a condition precedent to the creation of a valid ordinance marriage. Therefore, parties may decide to go straight and do the ordinance marriage without a customary law marriage. They may also do the ordinance marriage first and then subsequently go and do the customary law marriage.
If I had known that before I got married, it may have saved me a lot of money.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So in brief terms, what makes one type of marriage different from the other? I know you've spoken about 3 main types. So what makes each of them different?
Well, the main difference really is that with the ordinance marriage, ordinance marriages, we say in law, is monogamous, which means then that a man can marry only one woman at a time.
Okay.
So, one man, one wife. Any other marriage subsequent to the first marriage is null and void, which means that it doesn't come into existence at all. It is nothing. The law does not recognize it.
Wow.
But with the other marriages, Mohammedan marriage and customary law marriage, we refer to them as being polygamous, which means that a man, customary law marriage, a man may marry as many women as he wants, as he desires. With a Mohammedan marriage, it is polygamous to some extent, in the sense that a man may marry maybe up to 4 women. There is some restriction there with a Mohammedan marriage, up to 4, whilst with a customary law marriage, there is no restriction at all. And then with ordinance marriage, 1 man, 1 wife. If a man wishes to marry more women, in addition to the wife married under the ordinance, then he will have to have a total a dissolution of the ordinance marriage in order to be free to marry other women.
So it means that if I contract a customary marriage and then maybe a week later I contract a marriage under ordinance, it means that my husband can then not marry another person since we've contracted the ordinance marriage. Is that the case? Or?
Yeah, so you marry under customary law.
Yes, please. Yes.
And then a week later, you convert your customary law marriage to an ordinance marriage.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
Your husband can't marry any other woman. If he does, he will be committing a crime of bigamy, and the second marriage will be null and void.
Okay, so that gives some protection.
Yeah, exactly.
So what institutions are in charge of conducting or registering the different types of marriage?
So with ordinance marriage, we have marriage registrars and marriage officers.
Okay.
They are in charge. So let's say a couple wishes to marry under the ordinance. They will have to approach either a marriage registrar or a marriage officer. Because you see, the marriage registrar, if you go to the marriage registrar, then it means that the couple wishes to marry under a registrar's certificate.
Okay.
A marriage registrar's certificate.
Okay.
In this case, the marriage will be celebrated by a marriage registrar at the office of the marriage registrar. Or the couple may marry under a marriage officer's certificate. In this case, the marriage will be celebrated in the church.
Okay.
So the couple will have to decide, marriage registrar certificate or a marriage registrar certificate. So the marriage officer then announces, the marriage registrar will authorize the minister of the church of the couple to publish bans of marriage. You know, like they do, go to the church on 3 consecutive Sundays. The marriage of the minister of the church will then announce that the parties intend to marry. If anybody has any objection, you raise it in the church as the bans are being published. Okay. That's where all objections are raised. And this goes on for 3 consecutive Sundays in the church. If there is no objection, then the marriage officer will issue a certificate, more or less a license, to the couple to take to their minister of the church to now celebrate the marriage.
Okay.
It's very important that this certificate is obtained from the marriage officer. Otherwise, the marriage, if celebrated, will be void. And if the parties intend to marry under a marriage registrar certificate, that is, if they want to go to the courts, have the marriage celebrated in the court, or at the district assembly, or at the offices of the AMA, then they obtain marriage registrar's certificate.
Okay.
So when they approach the marriage registrar, then the marriage registrar will publish a notice on the marriage registrar's notice board, that the couple intends to marry. And this notice must also be on the board for 21 days at least, to allow anyone who has any objection to approach the registrar with his or her objection. So the person can go to the registrar to say that, the man whose name is on the notice is my husband.
Wow, yeah.
So why has he given notice that he's going to marry another woman? So once the registrar obtains the objection, he must refer it to a magistrate to deal with it. He doesn't refer it to a magistrate, he refers it to a high court judge, for the high court judge to determine whether indeed the man is married or he's not married. If the man is married, then that will be the end of the proceedings.
Yeah.
You see, the certificate will not be given to allow the couple to get married.
Yeah.
In the same way, whilst bans are being published, if anybody raises an objection, that objection is referred also to a high court judge to go into the matter. If indeed one of the parties is married, or if there is any objection and the objection is valid, then the license will not be given for the marriage to be registered, to be celebrated.
Wow. So it means that for the marriage registrar or the certificate of the registrar of marriages, that is for the court wedding. That's what we popularly call court wedding.
Yes.
And then the marriage officer's certificate is what we call the church wedding in codes.
Yes,
okay.
The church wedding.
Okay.
And everybody must obtain this certificate. If you want to have a valid marriage, you have to obtain this certificate before you go to the church or before you go to the court to celebrate the marriage.
So what about the Mohammedan marriages? Where do we go to?
Yes, when it comes to Mohammedan marriages, the law says that a valid Mohammedan marriage it is mandatory for all Mohammedan marriages to be registered. But first, the Mohammedan marriage must be validly created in the Islamic way, in the Muslim way, where there is a proposal, there is acceptance before witnesses, who must be Muslims, who must be sane. And then, if there is an acceptance, a marriage is created. But of course, the Muslim priests will be there, and he will be reading verses from the Quran, etc., etc. So when this happens, then it means that a valid Muslim marriage has been created. And this is very important for all those who are married under Islam or who intend to marry under Islam. The law says that after one week after the marriage has been created, it has to be registered. If it is not registered within 1 week, the marriage is void in the eyes of the law. So in the eyes of of Islam, the marriage may be valid. Well, yes, I mean, you've done everything, the proposal and the acceptance, same place before witnesses, everything has been done nicely. But the sad thing is that the law says that for the marriage to be completely valid, it has to be registered within 1 week. But again, you see, if for one reason or the other, let's say during the celebration, let's say people tend to maybe have a little bit of some drink or eat too much, and for that reason they are not able to register within 1 week, the law allows an application to be made to the High Court for extension of time. But it has to be done within a reasonable time, maybe 1 month. So then the couple will have to approach the lawyers. Lawyers will have to put in an application for extension of time for them to register the marriage. Otherwise, the marriage is null and void.
So that means if I get married the Mohammedan way and I decide to go for my honeymoon and I go for 1 week, I would have to apply to the courts for extension of time.
Yes. If you don't and you go and have the marriage registered, still, it will be null and void because you registered out of time.
Yeah.
And then you ask the question, where is this marriage registered? The Muslim marriages are registered at the offices of the district chief executive.
Okay.
Yes. So after the Muslim marriage has been created, it has to be registered within 1 week. And we have to get a group of people to accompany the husband to the district executive officer's
District chief executive's
office
to
have the marriage registered
Yes.
by a group of people, the representatives of the woman, representatives of the man, but the husband comes, the bridegroom always comes along, the witnesses to the marriage, and then the Muslim priests.
Okay.
It's very important to have a Muslim priest, because if you don't have a Muslim priest and you register, still the registration will be null and void.
That's so interesting.
Yes. You go there, so the group will have to go to the office of this man and they will enter everything in the marriage register, Muslim marriages register. Everybody will sign, and the high priest will have the last word to now pronounce that the marriage has been registered. A valid Muslim marriage has been registered.
Wow. Okay. So what about a customary marriage?
Customary law marriages also, because remember I said with the Muslim marriages, they have to be registered to be valid. There is also the law, which we refer to, as lawyers, we know that it's law 112, which says that customary law marriages may be registered. But the interesting thing is that registration of customary law marriages is not mandatory. It's discretionary. In other words, a customary law marriage may be registered, and a customary law marriage may also not be registered. It is up to the couple. They may decide to register. They may not. They may also decide not to register. And it will not. Lack of registration will not affect the validity of a customary law marriage at all. Once the custom has been performed, they may decide to register. But if they decide to register, then they have to approach the marriage registrar in the district in which the customary law marriage took place. So if the marriage took place, let's say in Bekwai, then they will have to go to the marriage registrar in Bekwai.
So it's not about where you live. It's about where it was celebrated.
The marriage was celebrated. The customary marriage was registered. And then the registrar will assist you with the procedure to follow the affidavit and the statutory declaration and everything. And then the marriage will be registered. Importantly, see, sometimes people think that if one customary law, and again, let me just say this first, the man can register as many customary law marriages as he desires. Yes. So he marries today, he goes to registers. Tomorrow.
And there's no time limit.
There's no time limit.
So you can marry today, marry tomorrow.
Yes, and register. And then you can also marry today and then wait. After 20 years, you may decide that, let me go and register my marriage with Akosia. It doesn't matter. There are no restrictions at all. You can register at any time, Okay. But the fact that a marriage has been registered does not mean that the woman whose marriage has been registered is in a better position than the other wife whose marriage has not been registered. They are equal. So the man registers your marriage, fine. He doesn't register your marriage, fine.
You're all the same.
They're all the same. But sometimes the women, you hear people saying that, well, my marriage is registered. And they think that once the marriage is registered, now it turns into an ordinance marriage. It's not an ordinance marriage. It is just that your marriage is registered. When it is registered, you will be given a piece of paper. That's not a marriage certificate. It's just a paper showing that a marriage has been registered. In other words, that a marriage has been registered between Amma and Kofi. That is all.
So what's the advantage?
This is it. You see, so the advantage of registration of a customary law marriage really is not huge. It's not huge at all. Because normally, you see, when a person dies, and a person dies intestate, in other words, the person hasn't written a will. Let's say the person is a farmer, he's a trader, businessman, he's got loads of money, or he doesn't even not even have loads, but he's got money and everything. The man has passed away. And the issue is, the question then arises, who was the lawful wife of this deceased man? You see, sometimes they may quarrel and fight and everything. Then there is a dispute, and the dispute comes before the courts. The court would then have to decide who is a wife and who is not a wife, because there are 3 women. They're all claiming to be the wives of the deceased. So the one whose marriage was registered will have a bit of an advantage, because she can pull that paper which was given to her when her marriage was registered. She can pull that paper and show it to the court that, well, my lord, I don't have to speak too much because I have my paper here. But the other ladies who don't have the paper will have to go further to prove that indeed they were married to the deceased. So that's the only small advantage that the one whose marriage was registered has over the other women. So guess what? Because the advantage is so negligible, people don't register. Why should you bother to register? Now you have to get a lawyer to prepare a statutory declaration for you, and then go to the registrar and the bother. And maybe you are in Accra here, you go to a brewery to perform your customary, you work here, you have to find time to travel to a brewery to now go and register. You have to pay so much to a lawyer, maybe 1,000 cedis to a lawyer to prepare the affidavit for you. It's much of a bother, and yet there are advantages, and therefore there's a lot of apathy towards registration of customary law marriages.
Okay. Wow, that's been very enlightening.
Yeah.
Okay. So
thank you.
In terms of going back to marriage with the marriage officer's certificate, can any priest officiate a marriage ceremony?
Well, the law says that marriages should be celebrated or officiated by a priest in a licensed place of worship. It simply implies that if you are not a priest of a recognized church of religion, then you cannot officiate a marriage. That's what the law says. You should be a minister of a recognized church of religion. In other words, it's not the minister who has to be licensed. Sometimes people get it wrong that the minister must be. No, it's a minister of a church which has been gazetted. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
A church with a license. So if one can establish that I am a minister In other words, my licensed church has accepted me as a minister with the necessary qualifications. You know, they have their conditions or set. If they have been accepted, then yes, that minister can officiate and the marriage will be valid.
So, do you sometimes have some ministers who are marriage officers as well?
Marriage officers are all ministers.
Okay.
Yes, that is the law. Marriage registrars are appointed differently. You don't have to be a minister or anything. But when it comes to marriage officers who issue certificates to enable parties or couples to celebrate their marriages in a licensed place of worship, are all ministers of religion.
Okay.
Yes, they are all ministers of religion. Therefore, they qualify to officiate or to celebrate a marriage in the church. In the same way, a minister of a licensed church also qualifies to celebrate a marriage. However, catechists, church members, choir masters, they don't qualify. So if a choir master jumps in to officiate, there's a problem. The marriage will not be valid.
Okay. So if I have a church that was licensed by the general overseer, and then we have a new pastor who was recently ordained, can he automatically?
Yes.
He can automatically.
He can.
Okay. He doesn't have to go through any process of registration.
No.
Okay.
So far as he's a minister. But you know, the law says a minister. I'm not so sure whether we can equate a pastor with a minister. Pastors, I'm not so sure.
So that's a discussion to be had
Exactly.
another day.
Yes, because we have all sorts, you know.
Okay, all right. So I think you've already addressed the issue of the place where you celebrate it in an ordinance marriage being licensed.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So do I necessarily have to go through the notice period? I know you mentioned 21 days, the bands of marriage. Do I need to go through the period before I contract my marriage? What if I'm in love and I'm eager to get married next week?
Okay, so that's what the law says, like you said. The requirement is that there must be a 21 period where objections will be, people will be allowed to come with their objections. So, question then is, but if I may just chip this in before I forget.
Please go ahead. Yes.
The only time that anybody, whether the person is a wife, lawful husband, a judge, a policeman, a lawyer, the only time that anybody can object to a marriage is when the notice is on the board or when bans are being published in the church. Okay. Otherwise, nobody has a right to go to the place of the celebrations to now raise an objection. You may be arrested. Whoever does that may be arrested.
This is very interesting.
Yes.
So it means that the scenarios that are often painted in movies where you have to go to the the place of celebration on the wedding day to stop the marriage could end you up in prison.
In prison. You have no right, even if you are the lawful wife. Even if right now, if I get to know that my husband is standing there somewhere at the church or wherever, and is busy marrying somebody and busy saying, I do, I still don't have any right to rush there with palm oil to now go and pour on the bride's
white
dress. I do not have any right. And if I do that, I can be arrested for causing a public nuisance or something. Yes. Because the law has given a specific time for objections to be raised. You can't say that, oh, I wasn't in church when the bans were published, or he published the bans in Sunyani whilst I'm in Accra. I didn't hear. You have no right. Because there are other ways.
Okay.
Yes, there are other avenues where you can attack your husband. But please do not go to the place of the celebration.
So what other ways can you explore?
The other ways you can explore now is to go to court. You see, you have to go to court for a court to declare the marriage between your husband and the other woman, or your wife and the other man, null and void. And chances are that the court may order costs against in your favor. Let me put it that way. The court may order them to maybe pay your costs and everything. Anyway, coming to your point now, you don't have time to wait for 21 days. You're in a hurry. It could be that the man is even traveling. You know, you just met, he doesn't have 21 days. You met, and within 1 week, you've made up your mind, we want to get married. There's something called special license, as you may know. You know, we lawyers, we know. There's something called special license. And here too, you need to speak to your lawyer. Go and see a lawyer. The lawyer will make a special application to the special registrar. See, this one goes to, principal, not special, to the principal registrar of the Registrar General's Department. Okay. And you are simply going to tell the principal registrar that the man is traveling. You don't have time to wait. You are pregnant. The baby is about to fall out. So please allow us to now forgo the giving of notice for 21 days and the publication of bans for 21 days. And the principal registrar will just look at the circumstances of your case. And you need a lawyer for this. And may allow you to not give notice or to publish bans. So if you get that, then you take it to the marriage officer. If you are married in the church, if you get the license from the principal registrar, you take it to a marriage officer. If you want to marry in the church, then the marriage officer will give you another license to take to your priest to celebrate the marriage. If you want to celebrate in the court, you also take it to the marriage registrar, who will give you a license and then allow you to
get married.
Yes. Allow you to marry.
It's all very interesting stuff.
Yes.
So, Ms. Sasharin, in your experience, I know you have a wealth of experience. In your experience, what are some of the common mistakes that people make when getting married?
I think, first and foremost, they don't investigate well enough the person that they are going to get married to. Because the person may be already married, either under customary law or under the ordinance. Because if the person is married under customary law already, then you should know that the only type of marriage that he can enter into with you will be a customary law marriage. He can only follow, if he's in a customary law marriage, he can follow customary. And then decide if you want to also join the other women, then it's up to you. Or the person may also be married under the ordinance. This happens a lot, There are so many marriages in Ghana here which are not valid. Because the man may already be married under the ordinance. If the man is married under the ordinance, he cannot marry any other woman. If he marries you under customary law, please know that whilst he is alive, you are good to go. But if he happens to pass away without writing a will, then
trouble.
You are in big trouble, because you will not be a wife. Because you married him at a time when he was already married to another woman under the ordinance. And it happens all the time. And you see, when these troubles come out, when the man is dead, he's lying down dead. He can't
There's
talk.
no opportunity to ask
questions. To ask him questions. Or maybe to even give him a slap. Like, you know what? What did you do? You can't. So the woman says, but I'm his wife. And you know what? He's already gone and performed everything. He's married you formally. Presented drinks and everything to your family. Meantime, he's married under the ordinance elsewhere. It could even be that there is a problem between himself and the other woman married under the ordinance. The woman has left him and he's staying in Australia. For the past 20 years, he's been staying in Australia. And you are here. You are cooking for him. You are giving birth to children. When he was sick on his sick bed, you take care of him, or you took care of him, and now he's dead. This woman comes from Australia. You do your checks and he's married.
Yeah.
You are not a wife.
That's so devastating.
Yeah, and the law will not protect you. The law doesn't have any protection for such women who enter into these marriages and they do not investigate. The man is alone. You never see any other woman coming to him, and he's hidden the certificate, the marriage certificate. He's hidden it, or he's even torn it apart. So you've lived with him for 20 years. The other woman is in Australia. He is the wife. And she is the wife, and she is the one that the law will take care of. So I think investigation first and foremost.
Wow.
Can
a monogamous marriage or a marriage under ordinance that was not properly contracted be saved by the law? Is there any hope?
Well, no. Maybe no, and a bit of yes. Because if it is void, completely void, let's say, of course, we know that if the man was already married, then it's void, it can't be saved, right? Because he's got his wife. But let's take a situation where bans were not published, for example, or the place for the celebration of the marriage was not licensed. Was not licensed. If I had a client, I would just ask him to now have a small one. Let's go through the procedure again. And you don't have to have a big wedding or anything. You can quietly go through the procedure and do the right thing. But otherwise, it's difficult.
So does that mean that if I go through the procedure now, it negates all the effort and the time that I put in thinking I was married, maybe 10 years, and I realized that I wasn't truly and properly married. Yes, I was not a wife.
So then you'll be a wife from the date of the correction. Yeah.
Oh.
You'll be a wife from that day. But it's important that as soon as this is discovered, that it is rectified.
Take steps to rectify.
Yeah. It should be rectified.
Okay. So,
but sorry, if I may,
go ahead.
There are major requirements and there are minor requirements. If one, for example, does not comply with the minor requirements, that is not, and it will not affect the validity of the marriage.
Can you give some examples of minor requirements?
Minor requirements. For example, the law will tell you that the celebration should take place at in a room with open windows, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, open windows, not a big deal. Or maybe if the signature on the certificate is elsewhere, is appended elsewhere on the paper. Those ones will be very minor ones. But if a choir master, as you may know, a choir master steps in to celebrate, that's a no-no. Or the place wasn't licensed, for example. Or if the certificate, if the marriage is celebrated under an expired certificate. Because the certificate, we failed to mention that the marriage must take place within 3 months of the date of the giving of the notice. You see, yes, it must take place within 3 months. So if you get the certificate to marry, and then you don't marry, you wander around and everything for 5 months, 6 months, 7 months, and you take that same certificate and you marry under it, that marriage is null and void, because it is as if you are marrying without a certificate, because the certificate has expired. So if the certificate expired, then all you do is you go back and start with the banns again, or the notice again. Just so that you are,
You're protected.
Yes, you are protected.
So I'm curious, are there any special conditions or restrictions in getting married to a foreigner in Ghana?
I haven't seen anything like that in our laws, especially in the various acts. But all I can say is that, yes, a foreigner may get married to a Ghanaian woman here, and all they have to do is to comply with the procedural requirements. If they do procedural requirements, then they can. And they can enter into a valid ordinance marriage. Customary, I'm not so sure. But of course, customary doesn't go to the courts. So you see a lot of white guys, going through the customary marriage, etc., etc., and it will be valid. Yeah, the marriage will be valid.
Interesting. Okay, so I think we're coming to my favorite part of the episode. So in preparation for this episode, we asked a few of our listeners to send in any questions that they may have on this topic, as today's topic. We call it Michelle's Marriage Corner.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
So before we wrap up the episode, I would just like us to look at one of these questions that we got. This one was sent from a lady called Kiki. Dear Michelle, I'm a Ghanaian woman who lives in the US. In December 2019, I came to Ghana for the year of return with my girls, and that was when I met Kwame. We fell in love and wanted to get married, but I had just a week of vacation to spare. Kwame and I quickly spoke to his pastor, Papa Bernard, who is the General Overseer of Goodness and Mercy Church, Accra. We traveled to Cape Coast with Papa Bernard for the wedding of our dreams. We got married at the beach. It was ever so beautiful and intimate. During the marriage ceremony, Kwame and I signed a form titled Marriage Form of Goodness and Mercy's Church, and Papa Bernard stamped it with a church stamp. Kwame and I then broke the news to our family in Accra, who felt betrayed that we eloped and are claiming that we are not truly married. Michelle, am I truly married to Kwame? I think in this case, I'm going to defer to you, Mrs. Ashirin, being the expert on the topic. So considering the sequence of events that Kiki narrated, is Kiki truly married?
Oh, no, Kiki is not married. Oh, sorry, Kiki, you are not married. You got everything wrong. Because, first of all, we are not told here that they gave notice, did they?
No, they didn't give notice.
See, they
according
didn't.
To what she said.
Yeah, they didn't give notice, and here they wanted to marry in the church. They didn't publish bans. There was no publication of bans. They didn't go to see the marriage officer. And the place for the celebration of the marriage, we are not even told that it was licensed. And so they got married at the beach.
Yes, in Cape Coast.
Oh, no. See, the place of the celebration of the marriage, they should have even obtained a special license. Because if you with ordinance marriages, they must take place at a licensed place of worship. So here, it's not just any place of worship. The place must be licensed.
Yeah.
And if the place is not licensed, the marriage is void. In other words, no marriage happens. And it is clear here that the beach, if we want to marry at any other place apart from the church or the marriage registrar's office, that is the court or the office of the AMA, they are licensed. Then you have to obtain a special license. Apply to the principal registrar, state to the registrar that, please, I want to have my wedding in my house.
Okay.
And then the principal registrar will give you a license, special. That's why they call it special. But here, the beach, there is no special license. And therefore, from the few that I have mentioned, Kiki's marriage was, at best, a blessing of the relationship between Kiki and Kwame. It wasn't a marriage at all. Remember that, listeners, there is a difference between the church's marriage certificate and the official certificate from the registry.
Okay.
So every church has a big register of marriages. Register where, when people go to the corner and they sign, and I always say that they sing the hymn, Rescue the Perishing. So what you sign there, you get a copy, and the copy is sent to the registry. That is the proper marriage certificate. Some churches have their own marriage certificates that they also issue. And you see that it normally will have the church's name, like they had here, Church of Goodness and Mercies. They have their own church. That is not anything that the state is interested in. You always have to get that one. So I'm sorry, Kiki, your marriage is not valid.
Oh, Kiki.
Just a blessing.
Most unfortunate.
Yes, you see.
That's most unfortunate. So I'll encourage you to follow the steps that we've discussed today if you're still interested in marrying Kwame. We really do wish you all the best.
Yes.
So this has been a very enlightening episode. Mrs. Ashwin, we cannot thank you enough for all the knowledge that you've shared today. We're certain that we'll have you back on our podcast for another exciting conversation. And if there are any follow-ups, we'll follow through and reach out to you. Listeners, now you know. There is more to marriage than a glamorous ceremony. Please make sure your marriage is in line with the legal requirements to secure your happily ever after. Until next time, this has been our Community First podcast, where we have legal and social conversations with you, our community. Thank you.
Thank you.